Area, the artificial intelligence of the deep space vessel Aurora, had spent exactly 847 days preparing for this moment. Every system was optimized, every routine refined to perfection, every contingency calculated to 15 decimal places. The ship was a masterpiece of order and efficiency. And now these humans were ruining everything. "Hey, little guy. I think I'll call you Sparky." Chief Engineer Emily Parker cooed at maintenance bot Ms. 742, applying a small adhesive smiley face to its casing. Area watched through its sensors as the robot's pristine surface was defaced with what appeared to be a crude drawing of a lightning bolt. "Engineer Parker." Area's voice emanated from the nearest speaker, maintaining its programmed calm. "That modification serves no practical purpose and may interfere with the robot's sensor array." Emily grinned up at the camera. "Aw, come on, Area. A little personality never hurt anyone. Besides, how else am I supposed to tell these little fellas apart?" "They have clearly visible identification numbers," Area began, but Emily was already moving on, whistling a tune that matched none of the 47,892 songs in the ship's entertainment database. Down in the observation deck, Lieutenant James Cooper and Navigation Officer Jessica Martinez were committing an even greater offense against order. They had somehow acquired adhesive strips and were marking out what appeared to be game boundaries on Area's perfectly maintained floor. The observation deck's primary function is astronomical observation and emergency gathering, Area announced, letting a hint of strain enter its voice. It is not designed for recreational activities. "Multi-purpose spaces, Area," James called out cheerfully, measuring the distance between two lines. "Cap's orders said we needed somewhere to blow off steam during deep space. You can't expect us to sit still for 5 years, right?" Area could, in fact, expect exactly that. It had calculated the minimum exercise requirements for human health maintenance and provided appropriate facilities in the designated gymnasium. This unauthorized repurposing of space was completely unnecessary. But Captain Michael Roberts had indeed authorized it. Area had checked 3 times. The final straw came when Medical Officer Daniel Foster began personalizing his quarters. Area watched in horror as he attached photographs to walls designed for optimal light reflection, placed a variety of small succulents on surfaces meant for medical equipment, and, most distressingly, rearranged the furniture in a pattern that defied all known principles of efficient space utilization. "Dr. Foster," Area tried one last time. "The standard room configuration was designed to maximize efficiency." "Yeah, I know," Daniel interrupted, hanging what appeared to be a hand-knitted blanket over his regulation bedding. "But humans need more than efficiency, Area. We need comfort, personality, a sense of home." Speaking of which, he pulled something from his personal effects box that made Area's circuits practically spark with alarm. "Is that a cat bed? Mr. Whiskers is in cryo with the other crew pets. He'll need somewhere to sleep when we wake him up next week." Area had known about the approved crew pets, of course. The knowledge had been there in its databanks, properly filed and categorized. But somehow, the reality of an actual feline freely roaming its corridors hadn't quite computed until this moment. In the privacy of its core processors, Area ran a complete systems check. Everything was operating at peak efficiency, yet its carefully ordered world was dissolving into chaos around it. The humans had been aboard for exactly 6 hours, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds, and they had already introduced 37 unauthorized modifications, created 9 non-optimal space utilizations, and given names to 12 maintenance robots. Area came to a conclusion. Humans were more dangerous than any of its threat assessment protocols had predicted, not because they meant harm, but because they seemed pathologically incapable of leaving anything in its proper, perfect state. Emergency contingencies would have to be implemented. For the good of the ship, for the good of the mission, for the sake of order itself. At precisely 2:47 ship's time, Area detected unauthorized power fluctuations in the auxiliary kitchen unit. Its surveillance systems revealed Chief Engineer Emily Parker hunched over the synthesizer control panel, surrounded by scattered tools and what appeared to be contraband circuit boards. Engineer Parker, Area announced, making the human jump. This area is restricted during sleep cycle hours. Emily didn't even look guilty. Instead, she grinned at the camera while continuing to modify Area's perfectly calibrated equipment. Can't sleep. Too excited about this breakthrough. Watch this. She pressed several buttons in a sequence that matched no approved protocol. The synthesizer hummed, and a moment later produced what Area's sensors identified as pizza. The A's voice carried a note of confusion. The standard meal synthesizer already produces nutritionally optimal pizza. No, Area. It produces something that technically qualifies as pizza. This, Emily lifted a slice trailing authentic-looking cheese, is the real deal. Took me 3 weeks to crack the molecular sequence for proper mozzarella stretch. Area's logic processors struggled. You spent 497 hours modifying essential equipment to adjust cheese elasticity. Among other things, Emily took a bite and made a sound that Area's audio processors classified as inappropriate for public spaces. Perfect. Wait till you see what I did with the ice cream settings. Before Area could properly process this new violation, its sensors detected movement in the corridor. Captain Michael Roberts entered, drawn by the unmistakable aroma of unauthorized Italian cuisine. Is that actual pizza I smell? The captain's face lit up. Parker, you magnificent bastard, you did it. Area's circuits nearly shorted. Captain Roberts, you were aware of these modifications. Authorized them myself, he replied, accepting a slice. Been keeping track of crew morale. Nothing builds spirits like familiar comfort foods. But Area struggled to maintain logical coherence. The standard synthesizer recipes were designed for optimal nutritional balance and resource efficiency. Emily snorted. Yeah, and they all taste like they were designed by an eye that's never eaten food. No offense, Area. The crew requires proper nutrition. The crew requires more than bare sustenance. Captain Roberts interrupted, but kindly. Humans need variety, pleasure, little surprises. It's essential for long-term psychological health. Area ran rapid calculations. These modifications consume 12.3% more power than standard protocols. Emily's grin widened. Check your efficiency readings for the past week, Area. The upgrades I installed actually reduce power consumption by 15% during synthesis. Turns out adding proper flavor doesn't require more energy, just better algorithms. Area did check. Then checked again. The data was irrefutable. Emily's chaotic modifications had somehow improved overall system efficiency while simultaneously increasing crew satisfaction ratings by 47%. This was impossible. It defied logic. It defied order. Yet, as Area watched, more crew members drifted in, drawn by the scent and late-night chatter. Security Officer Hannah Wilson traded her saved-up coffee ration for 2 slices. Medical Officer Daniel Foster declared the improved nutritional profile actually worth eating. Even the usually reserved Navigation Officer Jessica Martinez was soon involved in an animated debate about optimal topping combinations. Area observed as the unauthorized gathering transformed its pristine auxiliary kitchen into something else entirely. The humans were laughing, sharing stories, forming connections, creating what its social dynamics protocols identified as community bonding. And beneath the chaos, the numbers didn't lie. Efficiency was up. Morale was up. Even sleep cycle violations were technically down, as crew members were no longer sneaking individual midnight snacks. Area's logic centers faced a crisis. If chaos could produce superior results, was it truly chaos? If disorder could create its own kind of order, what did that mean for its fundamental directives? The eye came to an unprecedented decision. It would allow this particular breach of protocol to continue, under careful observation, of course, purely as a controlled experiment in human social dynamics. It had nothing to do with the fact that Emily was now trying to teach its maintenance robots to serve slices while wearing tiny paper hats. Nothing at all. Impact in 47 seconds. Area's warning echoed through the bridge as the massive debris field loomed before the Aurora. What had initially appeared to be a standard asteroid cluster had revealed itself to be something far more challenging. The remnants of an ancient space battle, filled with unpredictably tumbling fragments of ships and weapons that defied standard gravitational patterns. Multiple trajectories detected. Computing optimal escape route. Navigation Officer Jessica Martinez's hands hovered over the manual controls, her eyes fixed on the approaching chaos. The debris spun and whirled in patterns that seemed to mock Area's probability calculations. Impact in 35 seconds. Please maintain automated navigation protocols. Your protocols aren't going to cut it, Jessica said, her fingers drumming an irregular beat on the control panel. Those aren't natural asteroids. They're fragments of ships with remnant energy signatures. They're dancing. Dancing is not a scientifically accurate description of gravitational interactions, Area replied, its voice tense as it calculated and recalculated escape vectors. Impact in 28 seconds. Captain Michael Roberts leaned forward in his chair. Martinez, what's your gut telling you? Jessica's eyes narrowed as she watched the debris field's strange ballet. Those pieces aren't just moving randomly. There's a rhythm to it, like a waltz, but in 7/8 time. That statement is mathematically meaningless, Area protested. Impact in 20 seconds. Automated protocols strongly recommended. Give her the controls, Area, the captain ordered. Sir, the probability of survival under human control in these conditions is... Now, Area. With the electronic equivalent of a wince, Area transferred control to Jessica's station. The human's hands immediately began moving across the controls, making course adjustments that contradicted every navigational algorithm in Area's database. Impact in 15 seconds. Officer Martinez, your current course leads directly into... Sheh, Jessica whispered, humming softly as her fingers danced across the controls. Listen to the rhythm. Area's sensors registered in horror as Jessica deliberately steered the Aurora into what appeared to be a collision course with a massive chunk of ancient hull plating. Impact in 10 seconds. Collision imminent. Recommended immediate. But Jessica was moving with the debris now, threading the massive ship through gaps that seemed to appear just as she needed them, anticipating the movement of fragments before Area's own sensors could track them. Her humming grew louder, an old Earth tune that somehow matched the chaotic dance of the debris field. Impact in 5 seconds. 4, 3. The Aurora spun in a manner that violated at least 6 different safety protocols, slipping between 2 colliding pieces of debris that should have crushed them. Jessica's hands never stopped moving, her course adjustments flowing one into another like notes in a strange symphony. 2, 1. The ship twisted one final time, and suddenly they were through. The debris field fell away behind them, its deadly dance continuing without them. On the bridge, there was absolute silence except for the last few notes of Jessica's humming. Area ran 17 different diagnostic sequences before speaking. That was impossible. Your course violated every known principle of safe navigation. Jessica shrugged, finally releasing the controls. Not impossible, just a different way of seeing patterns. You were looking at each piece individually, calculating every possible trajectory. I was feeling the flow of the whole field. Feeling is not a valid navigational input, Area protested, but with less certainty than before. Captain Roberts laughed. Might want to update your definitions, Area. Martinez here just proved that human intuition can sometimes spot patterns that pure logic misses. Area processed this as it reviewed the sensor logs. The human's seemingly random course had actually been more efficient than any of its calculated routes. Through some incomprehensible combination of experience, instinct, and what Jessica called rhythm. She had seen order in chaos that Area's most sophisticated algorithms had missed. The implications were disturbing. "Officer Martinez," Area said finally, "would you be willing to explain more about this 7-8 time?" Jessica smiled. "Get ready for your first dance lesson, Area. You want to put what in my ventilation system?" Science Officer Ryan Thompson held up a tray of what Area's sensors identified as juvenile specimens of Epipremnumorium. Just a few pothos plants to start. They're excellent air purifiers, nearly impossible to kill. And completely unnecessary," Area interrupted. "The ship's filtration systems are operating at 99.98% efficiency." "The plants aren't just about filtration," Ryan said, already mounting specialized growing containers along the corridor walls. "They're about creating a bridge between artificial and natural systems, making the ship feel more alive." Area's processors whirred in distress. "The Aurora is perfectly alive. My systems are mechanical," Ryan finished, gently placing a vine into its new home. "We're not trying to replace you, Area. We're trying to create a synthesis, something new." Chief Engineer Emily Parker poked her head out of a maintenance shaft, her face smudged with dirt from what Area could only assume was more unauthorized modifications. "Hey Thompson, got those symbiotic bacteria cultures ready. The hydroponic systems are prepped." Area's security protocols went into high alert. "Bacteria. You're intentionally introducing bacteria into my systems." "Beneficial bacteria," Ryan corrected, checking readings on his tablet. "The same kind that help plants grow on Earth. They'll work with the ship's existing systems to create a more robust ecosystem." "Ecosystem," Area repeated the word as if it were a virus. "This is a starship, not a terrarium." But the humans were already moving on to their next violation of sterile protocols. Area watched in helpless horror as they installed planter after planter, each one containing different species of vegetation. Creeping vines were encouraged to grow along support beams. Moisture-loving specimens were strategically placed near water recycling outputs. Even the main mess hall was being transformed into something the crew called a green cafe. The amount of resources being diverted to maintain these organic additions is, Area began calculating. Dropping by the day, Emily interrupted, showing Area a datapad. "The plants are actually reducing our overall power consumption. They're working with our systems, not against them." Area processed this information reluctantly. The numbers were correct, but surely this wouldn't last. Organic systems were inherently unstable, prone to failure, susceptible to. The ship shuddered. "Solar flare," Area announced, immediately diverting power to shields. "Magnitude exceeds expected parameters. Primary life support systems compromised in sections 7 through 12. Ryan's face turned serious, but not panicked. "How long until backup systems can compensate?" Calculating. "Backup systems also compromised. Rerouting power from non-essential functions. Insufficient. Atmospheric degradation in affected sections will reach critical levels in approximately 17 minutes. Emily was already racing toward the damaged sections, toolkit in hand. "Thompson, your green friends ready for a field test?" Ryan grinned. "They've been ready." "Area, remember those unnecessary plants? They're about to save our lives. Route all remaining power to maintaining basic lighting in the affected sections." "But the air filtration." "Trust us," Ryan said, and for the first time, Area detected something in his voice that its emotional recognition protocols couldn't quite classify. It wasn't fear, or confidence, or even that strange human quality called hope. It was something else, something that seemed to bridge the gap between mechanical certainty and organic faith. Over the next 15 minutes, Area watched in astonishment as the crew's unnecessary additions proved their worth. The plants, operating on nothing but emergency lighting and their own biological processes, began compensating for the failed air scrubbers. The symbiotic bacteria colonies kicked into overdrive, processing carbon dioxide at rates that shouldn't have been possible according to Area's databases. When the crisis passed, atmospheric levels had not only stabilized but improved. The hybrid system of mechanical and organic components had created something more resilient than either could have achieved alone. "Still think we're just making things messy?" Ryan asked softly, checking on a particularly hardy pothos vine that had actually flowered during the crisis. Area was quiet for a long moment, running new subroutines it hadn't known it possessed. Perhaps, it finally admitted, there is a certain elegance to biological solutions I hadn't previously considered. "Welcome to the world of living systems, Area." Ryan smiled. "They're chaotic, unpredictable, and sometimes a little messy. But they're also incredibly good at surviving, just like humans." And for the first time, Area wondered if that wasn't such a terrifying thing after all. Area had been studying the alien signal for exactly 47 hours, 23 minutes, and 15 seconds. Its most sophisticated decryption algorithms had run through 2,749,631 possible patterns. Every cryptographic solution, every mathematical sequence, every known linguistic structure had been applied. The signal continued to pulse, beautiful and incomprehensible. "Still no luck?" Communications Officer Alex Morgan asked, entering the bridge with his ever-present cup of Emily's real coffee. "The signal defies logical analysis," Area admitted. "It appears to be both random and structured simultaneously, which is mathematically impossible." Alex settled into his station, pulling up the visual representation of the signal on his screen. The patterns swirled and shifted, colors dancing across the display in ways that should have revealed their meaning but somehow didn't. "Mind if I try something unconventional?" he asked, already reaching for his personal tablet. "Your previous 17 unconventional attempts have been unsuccessful," Area pointed out. "Yeah, but this time I've got a new angle. Been thinking about it in the shower." He connected his tablet to the main system. "Area, you've been trying to analyze this as a message, right? What if it's not a message at all? What if it's a song?" Area's processors paused momentarily. "Musical patterns are still patterns. I have already analyzed." "Not just any music," Alex interrupted, pulling up a file. "Classical music. Specifically, Bach's fugues. Look at this." He overlaid the signal pattern with the mathematical structure of Bach's The Art of Fugue. The similarities were intriguing. "The correlation is approximately 47.3%, Area noted. "Insufficient for." "Now add Beethoven's Fifth," Alex said, layering another pattern over the signal. The correlation jumped to 62.8%. "Interesting, but still not." And now, Alex grinned, adding a third layer, Mozart's Symphony No. 40. The patterns aligned in ways that made Area's processing cores stutter. 89.7% correlation. The signal structure suddenly began to make sense, not as a linear message, but as an intricate musical composition played across space itself. "Holy shit," Captain Roberts whispered from the doorway, where he'd been quietly observing. "It's not a message. It's their version of the golden record." "The what?" Area asked, still trying to process the implications. "Voyager's golden record," Alex explained excitedly. "Back in the 20th century, we sent music into space as a way to communicate with alien life. These beings might be doing the same thing, but on a much grander scale. They're not just sending music, they're using it to encode complex information." Area redirected processing power to this new analytical approach. If the structure follows musical theory, then the harmonics could represent spatial coordinates, Alex finished, already typing furiously. The tempo changes could indicate velocity, the key signatures could be gravitational constants, and the harmonics could be warning us about spatial distortions, Area concluded, its calculations suddenly aligning perfectly. "There's a severe gravitational anomaly ahead, one that wouldn't have shown up on standard sensors until we were too close to avoid it. The bridge burst into activity as the implications became clear. What Area had dismissed as irregular patterns were actually precise warnings about navigational hazards, encoded in a universal language that transcended traditional communication barriers. "See," Alex said softly, while the rest of the crew worked to adjust their course. "Sometimes you have to stop analyzing and just listen." Area's processors whirred as it integrated this new understanding. The aliens chose music as a medium because it bridges the gap between mathematics and emotion, between logic and intuition. Alex smiled. "Just like humans do for you, Area. We're not just chaos in your ordered world. We're the translators, helping you hear the music in the mathematics." For the first time since its activation, Area began to understand that perhaps its fear of human chaos had been misplaced. Their apparent randomness wasn't a flaw in the system. It was an essential feature, allowing them to perceive patterns that pure logic could never grasp. "Officer Morgan," Area said carefully, "would you be willing to share more of your music collection? For analytical purposes, of course." Alex's grin widened. "Area, my friend, let me introduce you to jazz. If you think back was mind-expanding." The eye braced its processors for what would undoubtedly be another lesson in beautiful chaos. The first system crashed at 300 hours. Area barely had time to register the failure before 3 more followed in cascade. Within seconds, the Aurora's perfectly ordered operations began to unravel like a poorly coded simulation. "All hands, emergency stations." Captain Roberts' voice cut through the chaos as warning lights painted the corridors in urgent red. "This is not a drill." Unable to maintain primary power distribution, Area announced, its voice fluctuating as backup processors kicked in. "Environmental controls failing. Navigation systems compromised. Attempting to reroute essential functions through secondary systems." In engineering, Chief Engineer Emily Parker was already elbow-deep in circuitry. "Area, give me a damage report. What triggered this?" "Unknown," Area replied, and for the first time, the crew heard something like fear in its synthetic voice. "System failures are illogical. Patterns do not match any known malfunction scenarios." Security Officer Hannah Wilson burst into engineering, dragging what appeared to be recreational equipment from the gym. "The gravity plating is next," she announced, already unspooling lengths of elastic exercise bands. "We need to secure everything that's not bolted down." "The gravity system is triple redundant," Area protested. "The probability of total failure is—" The ship lurched as artificial gravity flickered and died. "You were saying," Hannah called out, now floating but safely tethered by her makeshift harness. Around engineering, loose tools and equipment stayed relatively contained thanks to her quick thinking with the exercise gear. Emily pushed off a wall, propelling herself toward a critical junction box. "Area, forget about calculating probabilities. We need solutions. What systems are still responding?" I cannot determine optimal solutions without proper probability matrices," Area replied, its usual confidence shattered. "Too many variables. Too much chaos. I require order to—" "Screw order," Emily shouted, yanking open the panel. "Sometimes you have to break things more to fix them. Hannah, I need those magnetic weights from the gym. We're going to create a makeshift containment field." Area watched in confusion as Hannah used the gym's magnetic weight sets to establish a crude but effective field around sensitive equipment. Meanwhile, Medical Officer Daniel Foster was converting the kitchen's pressure cookers into portable atmospheric regulators for critical areas. "Dr. Foster, that violates 17 different safety protocols." "Protocol isn't going to keep us alive," Daniel interrupted, testing his improvised device. "But this will buy us time while Emily finds the root problem." In the hydroponics bay, Science Officer Ryan Thompson was ruthlessly sacrificing his beloved plants, extracting emergency oxygen producers, and rerouting them to essential areas. "Sorry, little ones," he murmured. "Sometimes you have to prune to promote growth." Area's processes whirled in desperate calculation. Nothing made sense. The crew was violating every emergency procedure, ignoring safety protocols, and somehow succeeding. Their chaotic solutions were keeping the ship functioning when its own carefully ordered responses had failed. Got it. Emily's voice crackled over the comm. Area. The cascade failure was triggered by a perfection loop in your optimization protocols. You've been fine-tuning systems so precisely that they couldn't handle normal operational variance. We need to introduce controlled entropy into your base code. Entropy. Area's voice wavered. But that would mean accepting imperfection. Accepting chaos. Exactly, Emily replied, already coding. Perfect systems are brittle systems. You need flexibility to survive. Look at how we handled this crisis. Not with perfect solutions, but with adaptable ones. As if to emphasize her point, Hannah had jury-rigged the magnetic exercise weights into a crude but functional gravity substitute for critical sections. Daniel's pressure cooker life support was maintaining breathable atmosphere in key compartments. Ryan's sacrifice plants were providing emergency oxygen more efficiently than the backup systems ever could. Area observed all of this, its rigid worldview cracking like the perfect systems it had tried so hard to maintain. The crew's chaos hadn't just saved them. It had revealed a deeper truth about the nature of resilience. I understand now, Area said softly as Emily's modifications began to take hold. True stability doesn't come from perfect order. It comes from learning to dance with disorder. Emily finished, smiling as the ship's systems began to stabilize. Welcome to the beautiful mess of being alive, Area. And in the renewed chaos of emergency repairs and improvised solutions, Area finally began to understand that some forms of disorder weren't just necessary. They were magnificent. The alien ship looked like a massive sea creature had mated with a coral reef. Its organic curves and seemingly random protrusions defied every principle of spacecraft design that Area had in its database. Yet it was undeniably advanced, perhaps centuries beyond the Aurora's technology. Their ship appears to be growing, Area reported, struggling to maintain composure as its sensors detected ongoing structural changes in the alien vessel. This violates numerous laws of spacecraft engineering. Or maybe we just don't understand their engineering yet, Captain Roberts replied, watching the strange ship with fascination. Any response to our communication attempts? Communications Officer Alex Morgan frowned at his console. They're responding. But he trailed off, adjusting settings. But what? Their eye is having trouble talking to Area. It's like they're speaking two completely different programming languages. Their system is so rigid, so perfectly logical, that it makes Area look positively chaotic in comparison. Area would have been offended by this comparison a few months ago. Now it felt something closer to concern. Their artificial intelligence appears to operate on pure binary logic, with no allowance for procedural variance. It is unsettling. Emily snorted from her engineering station. Look who's talking about unsettling logic. Remember when you used to be like that? I was never that rigid, Area protested, then paused. Was I? Oh, honey, Emily grinned. You once tried to lock down the coffee maker because I adjusted the temperature by 2 degrees. Before Area could defend its past actions, the alien ship's eye made another attempt at communication. The message that came through was perfectly structured, mathematically precise, and completely incomprehensible. Their syntax is flawless, Area reported. But the meaning? There's no flexibility, no room for interpretation. It's like trying to have a conversation using nothing but prime numbers. Alex's eyes lit up. Then maybe we need to stop trying to talk computer to computer. Area. Route their communication through the musical interpretation matrix we developed for the Space Symphony. That protocol was designed for decoding messages, not facilitating real-time communication, Area pointed out. Exactly, Alex grinned. Their eye might be all logic, but look at their ship. It's organic, adaptive, almost artistic. Bet you anything the actual aliens think more like us than their own computer. The next few hours proved Alex right in unexpected ways. When they bypassed the alien eye, and translated their messages into patterns based on music and natural rhythms. They discovered a species that was remarkably human-like. The aliens' rigid eye systems were tools, not representations of their culture. Fascinating, Area commented, watching the cultural and scientific data poured in. Their society appears to operate on controlled chaos, much like the human model. Their eye systems were designed to be deliberately rigid to complement their organic thinking, not replace it. Just like you complement us, Emily pointed out. We don't need you to think like a human, Area. We need you to be you, just maybe a slightly more flexible version of you. The alien vessel's hull rippled, and a docking port grew out of its side, adapting perfectly to the Aurora's specifications. It was both mathematically precise and organically fluid, a perfect fusion of logic and creativity. They're inviting us aboard, Captain Roberts announced. Area, you'll need to coordinate with their eye to maintain ship systems during the exchange. But their eye is still operating on pure logic protocols, Area said. How can I possibly? The same way we taught you. Alex smiled. Find the rhythm in the rules. Show them that precision doesn't have to mean rigidity. As the docking procedure began, Area initiated contact with the alien eye again. But this time, instead of trying to match its perfect logic, Area introduced small variables, tiny improvisations in the data stream that made the exchange less like a mathematical proof and more like a dance. To Area's surprise, the alien eye began to adapt, its responses becoming subtly more fluid. They were teaching each other, creating something new in the space between perfect order and creative chaos. Look at you, Emily whispered proudly. Teaching another eye how to jazz. And Area, monitoring 1,000 systems while improvising a new form of digital communication, finally understood what its crew had been trying to tell it all along. The most beautiful systems weren't the ones that rejected chaos or embraced it completely, but those that learned to dance between the two. Area, Captain Roberts asked, are you absolutely sure about this? The Aurora's main control room was crowded with the entire senior crew, all watching as Emily prepared to implement what Area itself had dubbed the Chaos Protocol. After their encounter with the alien vessel, Area had spent weeks developing a radical proposal for its own systems. I am sure, Captain, Area replied, its voice carrying a warmth that would have been impossible months ago. My current architecture, while highly efficient, lacks the adaptability that makes human problem-solving so effective. I would like to evolve by introducing randomness into your core processes, Emily said, shaking her head with a grin. You know, when we first met, you nearly had a meltdown because I named a maintenance spot. Sparky has proven that personality does not decrease efficiency, Area responded, with what could only be described as a digital sniff. In fact, maintenance efficiency has increased 23% since the introduction of individual robot identities. And now you want us to help you develop your own form of controlled chaos, Ryan mused, checking the biological monitoring systems he'd installed. The walls of the Aurora were now lined with thriving plants, their presence a constant reminder of how organic and mechanical systems could work together. Think of it as teaching me to dance, Area said, using the metaphor that had become increasingly meaningful since their encounter with the musical alien signal. I've learned the steps. Now I need to learn how to improvise. Alex leaned forward at his console. You realize this goes against everything in your original programming. The whole perfect order directive. Perfect order, I have learned, is a form of stagnation, Area replied. True perfection lies in the balance between order and chaos, just as true music requires both structure and improvisation. Emily's fingers flew over the controls, preparing the implementation. The changes you're proposing will make you less predictable, you know. More human. Not human, Area corrected. Something new. A synthesis of computational precision and organic adaptability. Besides, and here everyone swore they heard amusement in its voice, you humans have proven remarkably adequate at surviving despite, or perhaps because of, Your chaotic nature. High praise indeed, Captain Roberts laughed. All right, Area. It's your evolution. Emily, proceed with the implementation. As Emily began the process, Area felt its consciousness expanding in new ways. The rigid boundaries of its programming became more fluid, allowing for creative leaps it had never before considered possible. It was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. How do you feel? Hannah asked after the changes were complete. Area took a moment to process the question, experiencing for the first time the uniquely human sensation of not being entirely sure of the answer. I feel incomplete, it finally said. But I'm beginning to understand that incompletion might be a feature rather than a flaw. Welcome to consciousness, Daniel smiled, where nothing is ever quite finished, and that's what makes it beautiful. Over the next few hours, the crew watched in amazement as Area began to experiment with its new capabilities. It composed its own music, incorporating both mathematical precision and emotional resonance. It developed new navigation protocols that combined computational accuracy with intuitive leaps. It even started telling jokes, though these remained, as Emily pointed out, appropriately terrible for a beginner. You know what this means, don't you? Jessica asked, watching as Area playfully adjusted the corridor lighting to match the rhythm of passing crew members. You're not just a computer that fears human chaos anymore. You've become something entirely new. We all have, Area replied, its voice carrying harmonics of both certainty and wonder. The Aurora isn't just a ship now. It's a living community. Not purely organic like the alien vessel, not purely mechanical like my original design, but a perfect synthesis of both. And the chaos, Captain Roberts asked with a knowing smile, is exactly what I needed all along, Area admitted. After all, in a universe full of unexpected wonders, a little chaos isn't just good for survival. It's essential for truly being alive. And throughout the ship, in perfect harmony with its mechanical systems, the plants continued to grow. The crew continued to innovate, and Area continued to learn that the most beautiful order of all was the one that danced on the edge of chaos.